Giant pumpkins have become the obsession of gardeners who compete to grow the biggest fruit the world has ever seen. But now these orange monsters are becoming the obsession of artists, too. Giant pumpkin carvers are in high demand this time of year, with zoos, shopping malls, and casinos hiring them to put on a show for crowds. Patrick Moser of Jamestown, New York, has been carving the giants for nearly 20 years. He calls each pumpkin a personal odyssey. Recently, he appeared at the Pumpkinville farm in Great Valley, New York, to transform a 908-pound great pumpkin into one of his trademark grumpkins.
The interesting challenge is, of course, especially with my art form, is that I need to be an engineer long before I can actually be an artist.
Mr. Moser begins by opening a hole in the bottom of the pumpkin so that he can get inside to clean out the pulp and seeds and examine the interior for cracks. He views this as the most critical part of his art. Studying the inside of the pumpkin will tell him all its weaknesses and strengths and determine what his grumpkin will ultimately look like on the outside. Interior cracks, where the pumpkin shell may be less than an inch thick, must be avoided, while thicker lumps and bulges might be molded into big noses or drooping lips.
All these lines, marks, and measurements are. This gives me an idea where these defects are from the inside translated to the outside of the pumpkin, and gives me an idea of what the flesh thickness is in those particular spots, especially where the cracks are at their thinnest. Smile.
All of his pumpkin carvings are named only after he gets to know them. This one is Reuben Grogsworth. Finally, Mr. Moser sketches a rough image onto the pumpkin with a black marker. Though this is another critical part of the creative process, the sketch is only a guide. Reuben may not look anything like the initial drawing.
Tightly packed and dense material.
The carving is changing as he cuts. He must work carefully around soft, spongy places that can tear easily, but he can cut more aggressively into firm, dense flesh. Mr. Moser is pleased with this pumpkin, which he says carves much like a carrot. Giant carving is a kind of performance art. Crowds love to stop and watch and ask questions. Every giant pumpkin carver has developed his own style and his own set of tools. Mr. Moser's technique is to carve all the skin away from his pumpkin. He uses wood chisels and clay sculpting tools, along with cheese graters and lemon zesters, to get the final effect he wants. By the time he's finished, he's often stripped away hundreds of pounds of flesh from the pumpkin. Depending on the size of the pumpkin and how detailed his carving becomes, Mr. Moser can spend 20 hours or more carving one of his giants. By the end of the first day, he's got most of the face defined, the eyes and nose finished, and the beginnings of a mouth.
Well, we're here with Reuben.
By the end of the day Sunday, Mr. Moser has finished Reuben. To preserve the pumpkin as long as possible and keep it from rotting, he's given it a bath of antibacterial soap, bleach, and Tilex bathroom cleaner. The pumpkin will remain on display at Pumpkinville through the rest of the month, and Mr. Moser will move on to his next grumpkin.